never heard of a killer? I drop bombs like Hiroshima.
Somebody said, look at LeakYou video. What the fuck is LeakYou? Is it like a site? What's LeakYou? LeakYou. Is it a YouTube channel? Oh, shit. Oh, all right, bet. Here we go.
Please hit the like. Thank you.
One, two, three, four.
Man, good morning, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are across the world. I'm coming through with a late Monday night video to talk about a mass UFO sighting that occurred in California that's went viral, made a lot of waves, and people are still talking about it. Now, this mass UFO sighting captured by multiple people on camera. We're going to take a look at some of these videos that captured this, what has been dubbed the Palmdale UFO sighting, and the Lancaster UFO sighting in California. The video is quite compelling. Now, there was this happened back, was reported August 17th, when a flurry of Ring camera users claimed to have spotted and filmed UFOs zigzagging across the nighttime sky. Now, users shared reports of sightings all across Palmdale and Lancaster, California, which is north of Los Angeles and close to a U.S. Air Force base, with one video showing what appeared to be mysterious bright lights making sudden, jerky movements. Now, multiple individuals have shared their accounts. They described a bright light, a hovercraft-like aircraft, and unusual flight patterns, right? And this was noted on the Twitter platform, on X. And, you know, the Ring app has like a community app, you know, built in, where you can see what's going on in a community, right? I think it's associated to your address. And, you know, it's quite helpful because people report like break-ins, UFO sightings, obviously, missing animals, or, you know, if someone's lost an animal, that sort of a thing. You can report it through this community app with Ring. Now, again, this was captured by multiple people. Now, Palmdale is actually near Edwards Air Force Base, which is the second largest base in the United States Air Force. And it has long been a center for, you know, not only advanced aerospace testing, but numerous UFO sightings. Edwards Air Force Base has been mentioned in so many documentaries. But listen, one user said that they seen 6 UFO craft for like a 10-minute spell, making these insane maneuvers. Now, and also some reports did go to local law enforcement, and local law enforcement claimed they were investigating. However, that was ultimately denied by the Lancaster and Palmdale sheriff's departments. Kind of wonder why they would deny investigating something that was reported to them. But it's almost like how the Miami Mall incident got sort of shut down when beans were seen at Miami Mall, reported by hundreds of people. They had everybody with a badge was out at Bayside at that mall when that happened. And even to this day, there's been a lot, witnesses, weird stuff happening to witnesses that did interviews or talked about what they seen at the Miami Mall. But anyway, don't even get me started on that, because I could do video after video after video, all right, when it comes to the Bayside Mall situation and how these beings appeared to be shifting in and out of our reality. And I loved how, after the first few days of the Miami Mall incident, we had people, coming out just doing regular videos on Instagram, TikTok. Their videos were getting pulled down. Their accounts were mysteriously getting deleted from various platforms. The situation with UFOs and alien beings is too big for our government to control. It's way too big for the government to control. The cat is out of the bag. It's just a matter of how much are we going to pay attention. Now, shout out to those of you in the chat. Shout out to you, Emmanuel Briggs. Shout out to you, Cuban Crisis. Thank you very much. What's up with it, Third Eye? Good to see you. Listen, before we start looking at these clips, make sure that you follow my official podcast platform. I'm on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Google Podcasts. You can support my work there. And you can also, go to anchor.fm/LeakYou, where I have other podcast listings. You have the ability to download from the web directly. I'm also on iHeartRadio and a couple other sites. Make sure you check out my Anchor page, anchor.fm/LeakYou, where I only do video podcasts. You can listen to it if you want, but I always do video podcasts. So with all that being said, I want to take a look at some of these clips, right, of these mass UFO sightings that occurred in Palmdale and Lancaster. Now, one of the questions that I seen proposed was it possible that these could be like a team of drones, right? Now, this particular video is, appears to show, 60 to 100 different small orbs hovering over a family's home for 15 minutes. I would freak out if I seen something like that, hovering above me. But imagine you walk outside and you look up in the sky and you see all of these orbs. Now, it has been said that some UFO craft is almost alive. I've even heard stories of a particular being that was captured, right? And this being, this red being, was part of its craft as well.
Bro, what the fuck?
Now,
What? Why isn't my phone focusing? What is happening right now? Where is it going? It's landing. That.
now imagine you seeing this
Um.
happening, right? Look at, we got orbs dropping. Now, this was a very amazing one here. We've got what appears to be 5 to 6 UFOs that are hovering over the beach in California. And look at this. They're coming all the way to the ground. They're landing. What are they doing when they land? Are there beings coming out of these craft? You can actually see the craft on the ground, right? Many people thought they were watching UFO, or I'm sorry, drones, like a team of drones, but turns out that was not the case. Now, these craft look huge. These craft, again, were reported by numerous people. Recorded by numerous people. And look at this. How it's, you've already got, see one on the ground, and they're literally, these craft are landing. Fascinating. It is fascinating, okay? Fascinating.
Oh, what is that, Mom? Oh, what is that, Mom?
What?
Ma, you see this?
No. Holy shit.
What
What
is-
the hell is that?
What is happening? You guys see this? Oh my god, what the fuck is happening? What is that? What is that? Oh, what is that, Mom?
Again, we're not just talking about, one or two people reporting this. We're talking about potentially hundreds of people reporting these sightings, video taken from tens of people of these sightings while they were occurring and happening both in Palmdale and Lancaster, California. Now, there was also a flurry of UFO sightings in Hawaii right after this happened. And I love it when we
Ma, you see
get
this?
No.
a viewpoint from multiple camera angles. I absolutely love that. When we have people, multiple people that have recorded these sightings from different angles. It just solidifies that this is real, you all. This is real. It is time for us as a people to come to terms with the fact that UFOs are real. This is technology that we don't have a clue how to operate or create or make. It is being, this technology is being produced by a civilization of beings that are much more advanced. Whether you believe they're demons, whether you believe they're, beings from the fallen angels, whether you believe they are beings that come from Zeta Reticuli or other star systems, these are beings that exist that we as a civilization don't have a grasp on. We just don't have a grasp.
Food and
on
curve
this.
down this way.
I've even heard of particular UFO craft that mine minerals from Earth that are unmanned craft. And let's not forget about the Reddit poster that mysteriously deleted. Look at that. Look at that. There's no way that a pilot could ever make maneuvers like this in an aircraft. Now, I've heard that pointing lasers, there's been a lot of proof that pointing lasers at these craft will stimulate them in some way where, they may point a laser back at you. I've actually seen that happen quite a few times, to be honest with you. By the way, Biscuit says hello, everybody. Says hello. He hopes all of you having an amazing Labor Day. Shout out to the paranormal chick as well. I definitely follow her channel, and you know, she's bigger on TikTok than she is on the YouTube platform. But shout out to her. She does a lot of content like this as well. She got really well known on the TikTok application. But the 4chan / Reddit poster, that mysterious post that was mysteriously deleted, in which someone who said they were terminally ill came out and told the world about everything they knew about UFO craft, as this person worked for the United States government recovering these craft. And even the recovery of these craft is done in a manner that is siloed. So it's so possible that a member of the recovery team, say of the tools in the craft, may not even know who the recovery team say is of the bodies that may be in the craft, if it was a manned craft and it crashed and beings were killed during the crash, right? When I tell you that this particular post was so detailed and intricate, an amazing post, and something that this person kept emphasizing was that these craft are built to spec. There are, and we can't say every single craft, right? Because there's different species of these beings. But this person mentioned that in the ocean, several miles out in the middle of the ocean, there is a base where these craft are being built to spec. And they've actually been able to track some of the movements of these craft that are leaving this area and going back to this area once their missions have been accomplished. And this person believes that they're actually, you know, when the craft come back in, they're actually being broken down, and they're just reusing essentially the materials and again building craft to specs. If it's a craft that's carrying tools of some sort, this craft will be built with the tools inside of it, almost like it's one piece. It was, you know, made out of candle wax or something, molded as one whole piece. This person also talked about how it is impossible and extremely dangerous for anyone to even come close to this particular area where these craft appear to be being built to spec, and that there has been loss of life, that we, the United States, have sent pilots and submarines and things like that to this area to investigate it, and essentially those people did not come home. Essentially vaporized, you know, considered a threat. Now, the other interesting thing that kind of lended to this person's really strong character when they were speaking on this whole topic on this post, was that this person only overseen one particular like geographical area and only knew of this one base that came from this area. And listen, it happens to be near the Bermuda Triangle. Peep that, okay? Just think about that for a second. Now, it's possible that there could have been other bases making craft in other oceans of here on planet Earth, but this individual was not privy to that information. It's extremely siloed in how the government deals with UFO craft and the recovery of these craft. And believe me, the United States is shooting these craft down when they get chances to. There's been a lot of reports of them shooting these craft down and using a variety of different weapons to do so, even energy weapons that deal with pulses of energy that can disable these craft. Now, this particular Reddit post that I'm referring to, if you go to my main channel, or if you just search like LeakYou, UFO 4chan or UFO Reddit, you'll find the video. I'm on, like I say, I'm on a slew of platforms. All you got to do is just Google it. I went through this entire post, and I'm so glad that I did, because not even the next day after I did that video and we reviewed that post, it got mysteriously deleted. Again, this was an individual who was terminally ill, coming to the end of their life, and wanted to express what they knew. Felt like the world has a right to know, what the government continues to try to hide from us. And that is that we are not alone. One thing that is for sure is that human beings are not building these amazing craft. Not all of them. There are some that has been built by human beings, but no, not all of them. We are still amazed on how these craft even operate, how they move, period. The anti-gravity technologies that these craft deal with, right? And Bob Lazar described in great detail how he believed that these craft operated with the anti-gravity and the antimatter reactor and the element, the moscovium, right? That particular element that bends light. That on these, that literally bends light. And there was a video showing an experiment showing that when light is beamed onto this element, it bends the light. Antimatter, harnessing antimatter to propel your craft to go, thousands of miles away in the snap of your finger. Could you imagine if human beings got their hands on that type of technology? And what's scary is the United States government has had their hands on this type of technology for years. And best believe, when it starts getting out, there's going to be, contractors that are going to get to touch it first, right? Type thing. The United States has had a stranglehold on everything, regarding the UFO topic in regards to the recovery of these craft, recovery of bodies, doctors performing autopsies on these bodies. There's so many people that are in the know, but won't talk. For whatever reason. And some of those reasons is that people's lives are threatened when they start delving into the UFO community, anything UFO, bodies of beings, aliens, whether they're interdimensional, whether they're organic biological beings or androids / enhanced robots, which makes a lot of sense with some of the descriptions of some of these gray beings, that they don't have, any emotion, not even a sense of humor. Would make sense if they're a highly advanced android / robot. Everybody's so scared of AI, artificial intelligence. Everyone's afraid of artificial intelligence. For good reason. And what's crazy is if you look back 20, 30, 40 years, we'll just do 20, 30, 40 years, 20 to 40 years. There was fear of artificial intelligence back then, but there was never an understanding on how that fear would ever even manifest itself. And look what we've got now. We've got artificial, assistants, such as things with Google, right? You can just ask Alexa a question now. You can ask Siri a question now. You can Have Siri and Alexa do tasks. Turn on my lights at 6 o'clock every night. Turn them off at 10 automatically, right? And they're implementing these sorts of tasks into actual robots. One of I think the scariest things when it comes to like robots is weaponizing an android slash robot. I have no doubt that one day in the future, wars will be fought with robots and artificial intelligence. What's up with it, Uppercut Dale Cupid? Good to see you. Shout out to you. I have no doubt that these types of robots will be weaponized to fight in the front lines of war. You don't have to worry about it being shot down and killed, right? It's incredible. Now, bear with me just a second. I would like to bring up something for you all. Kind of a little bonus for you guys here. Give me a second. Yes. Okay. Give me a second, folks. I want to show you something. Let's see here. It has all of a sudden been removed from the Reddit page, as you can see. This post was titled as "I worked on a team that dealt with NHI technology and left in 2018." And as you can see, it says, sorry, this post was deleted by the person who originally posted it. Again, not to me, not to be, it's not unexpected. So I want you all to actually hear and see the post really quickly. Give me a second here. Here we go. Luckily, and I do mean luckily, I had yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, it was the day before. It took me 2 days to read through this post, right? So it is quite long, but I'm going to read through this for you all, and I want you to listen to this, prepared to be pretty much mind blown, okay? Let's go. All right. So this was a post written 2 days ago. And the title is, I worked on a team that dealt with NHI technology and left in 2018. NHI means non-human intelligence. Hi, I'm writing this because I never got any sort of debrief or moment to decompress from a job I quit in February of 2018. I worked for an agency that dealt with issues related to non-human intelligence. Sometimes these were referred to as EBEs, or as a friend lovingly called them, eyes. I can't divulge what I did specifically. Most of the information I'm going to discuss is anecdotal information that I found out about from colleagues. This is because it would be easy to identify me from what my role was, as the information I can say about what I did specifically would be personally identifying. Feel free to dismiss my post as a hoax entirely. I know the right people will believe me. I'm posting this for myself to make peace with the gravity, no pun intended, of the situation. I tried VA and independent therapy, but divulging this sort of information to a hipster trained in active listening probably wouldn't go well. Posting here is a last resort, but I hope I'm welcome to discuss what I can. I'll first talk about my career history, what working for the agency is like, how it functions, and then my general thoughts. If my post makes it past moderation, I'll answer as many questions as I can. I'm unwilling to post an ID privately to moderators or otherwise. People who did that faced consequences. I don't think those people were Reddit leakers specifically, but any act to talk about the information in any meaningful way outside of the chain of command ends badly. I'd rather be accused of making things up than risk that because I simply don't care what people think of me. Hopefully, my post will clear up why. I'm currently a university professor. Not at the university my username would lead you to believe. I was inspired to write this post when one of my students referred to me as verbatim, quote, a dude who has to know about aliens, end quote. If only he knew that wasn't even the start of it. I graduated from college in the early 90s with a degree in something I'm passionate about but never used. I started my career as an assistant for a mechanical engineer at an aerospace contractor I got after working some connections I had. Entry-level contractor jobs are easier to get than you may think. Well, maybe not if you've posted here. I eventually was a project manager overseeing a small team working on experimental aircraft. Over the course of my career in aviation, I worked at 3 different contractors. I was on some of the teams working in autonomous flight in Nevada, among other places. I'll share 2 major things I noticed that, looking back, could be related to NHI research, non-human intelligence. It was sort of open secret. It was let in on at some point in the late 90s that if a large-scale invasion or threat to the mainland U.S. were to materialize, the U.S. had an ultimate trump card of sorts that would render everything we were working on as completely obsolete. Jokes like, well, work smarter, not harder on X, because if it were to come down to it, we wouldn't use that technology anyway, weren't uncommon. I assumed this was referring to nukes. Later, I spent time doing inspections at various secret facilities due to my standing in particular agencies. If I'm identified, I will definitely lose that standing, so there's that. This was not as exciting as it sounds. It was very technical and boring. I was mostly just a glorified HVAC inspector. I visited a handful of facilities, but 2 of them in particular, hold on a sec, guys. One second. All right. I visited a handful of facilities, but 2 of them in particular stood out as there were areas within them I wasn't allowed to access. At the first facility, the scope of my job was to inspect the entire location. One area had its own security who, after a long discussion, basically told me to kick rocks. My boss wasn't authorized to let me through either. I wrote a scathing report about this incident in my overall assessment of the facility, and my boss erased it from the document entirely. The situation at the second facility was similar. I'll admit, I was what I guess my students call a Karen about it. I knew that whoever was operating these areas was working completely outside of congressional regulation, which, while it does happen in certain sectors, is really not a good look. Once I got the job I'm talking about, I was able to confirm the second facility was related to NHI research. I was never able to confirm the first was. After a teaching stint, I was offered an interview for a position in my project management roots again near where I was living at the time. I wasn't told what I would be working on, which isn't uncommon. I was excited to get back to work because I had been working on goal-oriented drone swarms in my free time and assumed that's what the interview would be for. The interview took place in a skiff in someone's house. Looking back, this was most likely a house that wasn't lived in, but just used for the purpose of interviewing potential hires without giving away the location. It's also likely this was the location because this agency doesn't exist in any official capacity. Yes, it has a name, It gets sort of kind of funding. Saying the name would get me killed. I wish I were exaggerating. I was told the name at the start of the interview, and I had never heard of it before. I've never even said the name out loud. Paradoxically, even though the agency doesn't exist, if someone knew the name, it's likely a paper trail exists through publicly available documents. A lot of the information isn't classified because the agency is so secretive. Going through the process to classify it in the first place would reveal it to too many people. In past interviews, particularly for the inspection job, I could refer to specific colleagues, facilities I worked at, or contractors I was in good standing with to play the usual interview game. In this interview, I was treated like a brand new hire. While I was already offended about how I was being treated, the interviewer started grilling me about my love for Star Trek and said that theatrics wouldn't fly in the position I was being interviewed for. Looking back, I should have never accepted the job, but the allure of working on swarms was too great. The first office I worked at was an office building that didn't stand out in any way at all. I believe our neighbors in the office park were a fashion studio and a dentist, among others. The difference was our building had 24/7 armed security. The first few days were heavy paperwork and onboarding. One of my old bosses called me on an office phone to talk to me before I was officially onboarded. As a management nerd, the biggest challenge of working for this agency is that it's a paperless office. It has its own highly sophisticated intranet with hundreds of archival documents. The implication was that unless it absolutely had to be saved, to never ever write anything down. I remember an early colleague telling me a Gantt chart is a great way to get fired. This was a challenge at first. Remembering all of the information with no documentation is not something I'm particularly built for, especially when the information is about non-human intelligence. Later, I worked in a facility within a facility, just like the one I had tried to inspect. It stored a craft. Being near the craft for extended periods of time is extremely dangerous, especially if it is being experimented on with power. I didn't observe any injuries to anyone while I was there, but all sorts of long-term nasty injuries were relayed to me through rumors and warnings. The craft was shaped like a dreidel without a handle. There was a large exterior piece that went missing when it was recovered. The theory it acted as a stabilizer, although some argue it was a crude weapon. It sat in a custom hydraulic rig that could be used to rotate it into all sorts of different positions, kind of like those astronaut training balls where they spin you around. I wasn't on the team that got to use the rotation rig. The rig was so large and extensive, I spent a few weeks thinking it was part of the craft before someone told me otherwise. Typically, the craft would be held on its side in the rig for easier storage. Its weight just naturally sat it that way, although it was intended to be flown vertically. The shape was directly informed by its purpose. Every shape is custom molded in a metallic material that would revolutionize the way we travel if we had it. In following the topic as much as I can manage to, I've seen some other people mention the material. There were some material scientists that had been working there for decades. I never got to go inside the craft. It was guarded 24/7. Boy, did I want to look. The agency goes out of its way to hire individuals who have little interest in working in this space at all. They recruit particularly out of BYU. Although you have to have a contractor or government career for around a decade to be considered for an interview. Published papers don't hurt. When I worked at the second facility, the sorts of people that were there were frustrating to interact with because my initial reaction to working in that facility was extreme excitement, and it wasn't shared. I believe this is partially responsible for the stagnation, high turnover rate, and compartmentalization. I quickly learned who to trust and gained some enormous that helped my work. Part of why I'm being secretive about my ID is because the turnover rate results in a sort of summer camp work environment. It's easy to point to classes of people in various non-leadership positions that all were hired, fired, or quit at similar times. If I said when I started, ended, and where I'd worked, I'd be easily identifiable because there are so few people that match my description. Leadership has been there forever. No, not literally. The agency is divided up into several wings, not unlike the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. I'm not insinuating they're a shadow government, but the wings check and balance each other in a way a government is at least designed to. These wings include mechanical engineering, biologic research, weapons research, computer science, tracking, what I'll call anthropology, what I'll call crash recovery, because that's what colleagues who are planning to come forward will call it, and security. I'll list some information about each. There are definitely more wings that I don't know about. What's unique is these subgroups exist all as part of different parent government organizations and are HQ'd where their parent agencies are. For example, the tracking wing is sort of kind of embedded as R&D at NORAD. This is a simplification of the actual paperwork involved. It's honestly complicated, and I don't know much about how it works. I do know that this is how they maintain funding even when the parent agency goes completely dark for stretches of time. It's worth mentioning that these departments employ at most 50 people each. It's typically much lower than that. This is why we're all pushing for whistleblower protection. It's not hard to identify us because there are so few of us in the first place. Mechanical engineering is exactly what it sounds like. It's the most extensive, the oldest, and the most compartmentalized. We have crashed craft in various states of complete. We had a recovered craft that worked almost perfectly.
Hello and welcome to On the Record. Flying saucers, extraterrestrials, monsters from outer space. The government has been telling us for years that they're not real. They're weather balloons or swamp gas or reflections from the sun or the ravings of lunatics. But serious UFO researchers say a breakthrough may be very close. Some of the government scientists who worked on the top secret Project Blue Book are ready to talk. What's more, a series of revealing government documents have trickled out of the federal files. Documents that paint a much different picture of the UFO phenomenon. One of the most dedicated UFO researchers lives right here in Las Vegas. His name is John Lear, and he is my guest today. Mr. Lear, thanks for being here.
Okay, George.
To begin with, you're a pilot, an airline pilot, captain. You have held 17 different world speed records at one time or another. You're a member of the famous Lear family that all Nevadans are pretty much familiar with, a former state Senate candidate. You don't sound like the kind of guy who would get hooked up in something that a lot of people would say is a bunch of nonsense.
No, it's just by coincidence that I got really interested. This about 2 years ago. My father saw a UFO and my brother did, and they were very interested, but there was really no proof, as far as I was concerned, to really look into it until about 2 years ago.
Your father and brother saw them. Can you give details?
My brother saw one. He was flying a P-38 from Phoenix to Los Angeles at night, It just appeared in front of him. He made two turns, 90-degree turns. It stayed in front of him and then disappeared. And my father was flying at night, I believe, over the Arizona desert, and saw one too.
So you got an interest because of the other members of your family. How did you start out?
I had an interest, but there was really nothing I could put my finger on. And like I say, 2 years ago, a friend of mine came through town. We had flown in Southeast Asia together, and he was retiring from the Air Force. He came over, and we started talking about where he had been for the last 15 years. And he mentioned that he had been stationed at Bentwaters. And I said, oh, Bentwaters, that's where the flying saucer supposedly was in 1980. He said, no, John, not supposedly, it was. He said, I don't care if you believe me or not. It landed. I didn't see it because we were confined to quarters, but I know people who did, and I'll give you the names. And if you ever see them, tell them you know me, and they'll tell you the whole story. Since then, I ran into one of the security police who was within 10 feet of the saucer and actually saw the 3 aliens get out and go up to General Gordon Williams, who was the wing commander at that time.
Now, there was quite a bit of documentation regarding this Bentwater incident. Why don't you go into that a little bit?
There's the Colonel Halt memo that came out under the Freedom of Information Act, and it told about the mysterious lights and beaming down and everything that happened in the forest except the actual alien landings. That wasn't in the memo. And there was also the tape, Colonel Halt tape, forest tape, that he made over a period of 8 hours. And there's a 20-minute segment that we've been able to get a hold of that you can hear him running through the forest and being worried, saying the thing's after us.
Now, why do you suppose that hasn't come out? I mean, this particular incident, why hasn't come out if so many people, and you've told me about this before, have seen it or seen these aliens? Why haven't some of them come forward?
A lot of them have come forward, but they're just not getting any press. It's something that people just don't want to deal with, the press doesn't want to deal with, and people aren't going to listen to something unless Dan Rather or any of your big press people are going to tell them about it. And they're just too spooked. The Air Force has made an art form of ridiculing people who have talked about this thing. They've done an excellent job of covering it up for the last 40 years. George, basically what we're dealing with here is, I'll give you the bottom line.
Okay,
I'm not trying to sell it.
I want to hear your thesis.
I'm not trying to sell a book. I'm not trying to promote a lecture. This is based on what I've come across after intense research in the last year. And I have found out that the government has retrieved between 10 and 15 actual flying saucers, 3 of which have been in perfect condition, 1 of which they tried to fly. They have between 30 and 50 alien bodies in cryogenic storage. We even have the name of the person whose job it is to show these bodies to the heads of state and the people who are authorized to see them. They represent at least 5 different civilizations.
I can't imagine a Dan Rather or a Tom Brokaw, if that were to come to their attention, a story of that magnitude, that they wouldn't do something with it.
Well, I can't answer that question. I don't know why they don't do it. There certainly is enough evidence based on what I've looked at. For instance, the Linda Moulton Howe documentary in Denver for the CBS affiliate there, called A Strange Harvest. Since 1975 to 1980, when she made the documentary, there's at least 9,000 cattle mutilations. Now, the government said that the mutilations were normal. Your desert predator did these, but they weren't. The mutilations, we
have a picture of these somewhere. Maybe we can see that as you're talking.
Well,
that's the next picture. There we are.
This is the mutilation. New Mexico State Police did the research on, or the investigation on it, and they cut out certain parts with and the cut was made with a laser beam far sharper than anything we have. As a matter of fact, they were able to determine that they cut between the cells and didn't cut the cells themselves. We presently don't have this kind of technology.
Well, if we don't know that we have this kind of technology, or you and I don't know that we don't, but that doesn't prove necessarily that it's ET.
No, except that there's usually a visual sighting of a flying saucer or a strange light at each one of these sightings.
Okay, you mentioned the saucers and the bodies. Now, what kind of proof do you have that is true? How do you know that?
Well, let me take a look. Let me read to you first what the Air Force says about the bodies. First of all, I'm going to read from the Introductory Space Science, Volume 2, Department of Physics, United States Air Force. This is Chapter 13, Unidentified Flying Objects. Now this is what the Air Force has the students at the Air Force Academy read. And it says, the most commonly described alien is about 3.5 feet tall, has a round head, arms reaching to or below his knees, and is wearing a silvery spacesuit or coveralls. Other aliens appear to be essentially the same as Earthmen, while still others have particularly wide wrap-around eyes and mouths with very thin lips. And there is a rare group reported to be about 4 feet tall, weight of around 35 pounds, and covered with thick hair for clothing. Members of this last group are described as being extremely strong. Now, I'm not making this up. This is an Air Force. You can pick out an Air Force physics book and read this stuff. And at the end of the chapter, they go on to say, this leads us to believe in the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet, or at least of alien-controlled UFOs. Now, the picture that we have of the big head that the Air Force describes, this picture was drawn by an Army surgeon. These are one of the bodies that was recovered in the famous Roswell incident of 1947.
Tell us about that.
It was the first flying saucer that crashed and was recovered by the Army. It was covered up. There has been several books about it. They recovered 4 beings, and one of the surgeons that was responsible for the autopsy drew that picture and came up with some of these interesting things in the autopsy. I'll just read a couple. 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, 2 round eyes without pupils, no earlobes, nose is vague, neck described as being thin, arms is described long and thin, reaching down to the knee section. You can see that there's a webbed portion in the hands, no teeth, no apparent reproductive organs, brain capacity unknown, colorless liquid prevalent in the body without red cells, no lymphocytes. And there's more in that particular report.
This is an autopsy report. And you said the government goes to great lengths, the Air Force in particular, to discredit this kind of stuff. Where did this come from? How did you get this?
That came in a private, that came from the private collection of Leonard Stringfield, who was one of the premier researchers. He worked for the Air Force in the early 50s in a secret project reporting UFOs. Then as a civilian, he continued his private research, and this is out of his collection.
Why does the government want to hide this? Why doesn't the Air Force just come forward? Why doesn't, why don't they level with us if this is all true?
Well, there's not really much they could say based on what I've been able to find out. George, they're really, what could they say about it? They've been researching it for many, many years, and based on my information, let's say that the president decided to make an announcement. This is, if he made it today, this is what I think that he would say. My fellow Americans, I come to you before you tonight with an announcement of great importance. Despite all our denials, flying saucers do in fact exist. Where they come from, we do not know. Who is in them, we do not know. Where they are from, we do not know, nor do we know how they got here or what they want. We are unable to duplicate any of the metals found on the several craft we have recovered, nor are we able to figure out how they are propelled. We have hidden these facts from you over the past 40 years in hopes that we could give you more answers. Unfortunately, we are no closer to answers today than we were 40 years ago. God bless you all.
In other words, you find it highly unlikely that the president would ever make a statement, anything like that?
No, it's just, it's too big. It's the problem is not only just the fact that there are 5 and as many as 10 different civilizations visiting us. Apparently, and this is from the research that I've done, at least 90% of them are hostile. And when I say hostile, if not hostile, they have a completely different set of morals than we do.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to come back to the president and aliens because there have been some statements made by presidents, including President Reagan. We'll be right back. Welcome back. UFOs, are they real? We're talking with John Lear on the subject. Mr. Lear mentioned a couple of minutes ago about what the president might say about UFOs. Do you believe that various presidents have been informed about what you believe to be the truth on UFOs?
Each president has been informed up to and including President Reagan. I'm not sure to the extent they are informed. Privately, I don't believe they are giving the full briefing. The people that control this information is a organization that we know of as MJ-12, and they're top group of military and scientists. And I do know that when the president becomes president, it takes at least 3 or 4 months before he actually gets the clearance to know everything there is. Now that doesn't mean they tell him, but it does take 3 or 4 months to get. Now, talking to the president, let's talk about what the president has actually said. Has he mentioned anything about aliens?
President Reagan?
President Reagan on December 4th, 1985. This is a copy of the speech from the White House just before he went over to Iceland. He says, I couldn't but, one point in our discussions privately with Secretary General Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in this world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet outside in the universe. We'd forget all our local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Now,
he couldn't be just making a supposition for purpose of making a point? You're saying he's trying to tell us something?
Well, here, 1 week ago at the 42nd General Assembly in front of the UN, September 21st, he says, in our obsession with the antagonism of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside, universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force not already among us? Now, this is right out of a White House speech. I'm not making this up.
What did he mean by this alien force? I mean, does it say? Does he go on to say something?
Yeah, he says, what could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our people than war and the threat of war?
I see.
But the point is, why would he even bring up aliens? I mean, it's pretty far out for the President of the United States to be mentioned threats from outer space.
Okay, what about President Carter?
President Carter, we have the quote from Carter when he was during his election campaign. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. I am convinced that UFOs exist because I have seen one.
Jimmy Carter says he saw one.
That's Jimmy Carter. He saw one in
So,
1973.
but he didn't tell us, did he?
He doesn't. The pressure is enormous on these people to cover this stuff up.
How can that be? Are they afraid of a panic? That people would panic?
There's the panic problem, and there's also the problem that, in fact, in Cro-Magnon man, there may have been some tinkering to make us what we are today. And that's been borne out by several researchers. We couldn't have developed exactly the missing link. Something had to happen to get us going. Between 4000 and 8000 BC, we had just been going along and for hundreds of thousand years not doing anything. All of a sudden, bang, we started making pottery, invented the wheel, invented fire, and everything took off. What was the key that did that? I don't know, but it causes one to think.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago before the break that you think 90% of these visitors are hostile. What makes you think that?
Well,
doesn't fit with what we think of as ET, you know?
If you read several of these books that are on the newsstands, one is called Intruders, one is called Communion. They apparently come down, and when I say apparently, this is taken from 300 hypnosis cases. A friend of mine has done 140 of them. And the people are abducted, they're taken up into a saucer, usually lasts about an hour. They do all kinds of experiments, they give them shots, they poke them, they cut them, they do all kinds of things, then wipe out their memory and send them back. Only after several months of some psychological problems do they end up going to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, on trying to find out what the problem is, in the use of hypnosis, finds out that this person has been abducted.
What's the reason for that? What are they trying to learn?
There's three things that they're trying to do with these abductions. The first thing is they're trying to monitor us. It started in the early 40s, and they'd put a little unit, very small BB-type object, way up in the backside of the brain, and they'd leave it there for about 18 years. They'd pick them up and put it in about 4 years old. About 12 years old, they would pick them up and monitor it. Then about 18, they'd take it out. The second thing they did is they put a post-hypnotic suggestion. According to many of the people that have been hypnotized, and we found out what they've told them, apparently within the next 2 to 5 years, there is going to be a big event. Something enormous is going to happen. And these people who have been abducted, and there's probably over 100,000 of them, have been given some place to go and something to do. But under our best hypnotic techniques, we cannot find out what it is.
So how do we know that that's true?
Because they said they're going to do something. They know that they're going to do something, but under the hypnosis, they can't find out exactly what it is. And the third thing that they do is genetic experiments. They've been crossbreeding. There's a very good book out now called Intruders, written by Bud Hopkins, and it's about a crossbreeding experiment with a girl in Indianapolis. And they actually, the big head, what we call the big head in research, the little 3.5 foot tall with a big head, they crossbreed that with this girl in Indianapolis, and there were 7 children. And just last fall, before the book was published, they brought the oldest and the youngest to show to her, and they let her name all 7. Now, this book has been thoroughly researched by Bud Hopkins, and although it sounds strange, believe me when I tell you, you may not find out in a month, a year, 5 years, or 10 years, but you'll look back at what I'm telling you now, and you'll say to yourself, my gosh, the son of a gun was right.
Well, where's this girl now? She's just living
on
a farm?
She lives in town, or just outside of town. She just got married. Bud went to her wedding. We all know who she is. She gets along, just fine. It doesn't mean, just because she was abducted and gave him children doesn't mean it was the end of the world. It was just a part of her life.
Why don't we see a lot of photographic evidence, as many cameras and video gear? Why don't we see a lot of that?
There are a lot of them.
Before you go on, I know the pictures that we showed in the beginning of this program, you say they're baloney, they're phonies.
That's right. The pictures you showed at the beginning were called the Myers incident. It's called the visitors from Pleiades. And any ufologist worth his salt knows, and who has researched that case, knows that he cannot back it up with the negatives and the essential information to prove that something like that happened. So we look at that as suspect.
So in other words, you run into your share of phonies as well in your research?
Absolutely. There's not that many, but there are a few out there. There's so many people that have real stories to tell that we're just so busy with those. For instance, let's take the November 17th Japan Airlines incident.
I'll tell you what, we're going to take another break, and we'll do that when we come back. Stay with me.
You gotta love the old school news clips. I wanted to let that continue to play, and I put a link in the live chat and description of this video. I'm also streaming to Rumble and YouTube and Facebook. That will link to this full video in which we read the entire 4chan, the Reddit thread that also had links to other video that was posted by the OP, right? And this was one of them. And even even describing how the craft's guidance system works, right? It's very amazing, so-called testimony, Reddit testimony, so to speak. But listen, you all, the link is in the description and in the live chat for you all to go and finish watching the full video. Shout out to each and every one of you for being here. Shout out to those of you on X, aka Twitter. I see all 70 of you all. When I see the views that I get on Rumble and on Twitter, it just really solidifies to me that YouTube absolutely shadow bans me. Anytime someone does content, even about aliens, UFOs, anything kind of in that genre, you'll start getting, mystery copyright strike takedowns. I've seen so many of those. False flags. Videos just completely just disappearing. No mention of where it went, that sort of a thing. It's only now become more acceptable to talk about UFOs, UAPs, aliens, non-human intelligence. It is only now becoming an acceptable thing. When I tell you, for the majority of the time I've been blogging, it's never been like fully accepted. People think, you're crazy. You're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when you talk about, this particular topic and some of the things involved in it. Yes, First Kind, if you rewind back, you will see that footage. We looked at quite a few clips of this mass sighting that happened in California. Anyway, you all, before I get up out of here, allow me to pay a few bills if you don't mind. Shout out to the Leak You community. Please join us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
Please hit the like. Thank you.
For anyone struggling with high blood sugar, do not drink cold water.
All right, everyone. Again, I appreciate each and every one of you for coming through. Shout out to each and every one of you in the chat as well, even all the content creators. Much love to you all. I am gonna get on up out of here. I'll see you all during the next live stream, folks. Until next time.
The judgment sentence that you are an asshole. The trial is over. Thank you, everybody.
Let's play a game. You have 10 seconds to take all your stuff and get out of my life. 10, 9, 8.
God bless you, motherfucker.
You're really smart, like really, really, really smart like I am.